Hello, friends. Okay, it is Thursday night, so this is your recording for Friday, March the 27th. Um, Again, no live Zoom today. You'll have this video and then your homework. So, I told you this morning we would start talking about the goddesses Demeter and Hera, who are Zeus's sisters. So, we're going to start with Demeter, and if you have your Google Slides up, she is the goddess of harvest and the goddess of grain. Her Roman name is Ceres, Ceres, and her symbols are wheat and cornucopia. And cornucopia is what you think of it, what you can see at Thanksgiving. Like that's the cornucopia. So those are her symbols. Now we've already heard about Demeter's daughter, Persephone, and that's mostly what her story is about, is her daughter. And we talked about her when we talked about Hades. All right, Persephone grew up on Olympus, and her happy laughter rang through the brilliant halls. She was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and her mother loved her so dearly she could not bear to have her out of her sight. When Demeter sat on her golden throne, her daughter was always on her lap. When she went down to earth to look after her trees and fields, she took Persephone. Whenever Persephone danced on her light, wherever Persephone danced, flowers sprang up. She was so lovely and full of grace that even Hades, who saw so little, noticed her and fell in love with her. He wanted her for his queen, but he knew that her mother would never consent to part with her, so he decided to carry her off. One day, as Persephone ran about in the meadow gathering flowers, she strayed away from her mother. Suddenly the ground split open, and from the yawning crevice came a dark chariot drawn by black horses. At the reins stood grim Hades. He seized the terrified girl, turned his horses, and plunged back into the ground. So there they are. A herd of pigs rooting in the meadow tumbled into the cleft, and Persephone's cries for help died out as the ground closed again as suddenly as it has opened. Up in the field, a little swineherd, like a boy taking care of pigs, a swineherd stood and wept over the pigs he had lost, while Demeter rushed wildly about the meadow, looking in vain for her daughter, who had vanished without leaving a trace. With the frightened girl in his arms, Hades raced his snorting horses down away from the sunlit world. Down and down they sped on the dark path to his dismal underground palace. He led weeping Persephone in, seated her beside him on a throne of black marble, and decked her with gold and precious stones. But the jewels brought her no joy. She wanted no cold stones. She longed for warm sunshine and flowers and her golden-tressed mother. Dead souls crowded out from cracks and crevices to look at their new queen, while ever more souls came across the Styx, and Persephone watched them drink from a spring under the dark poplars. Around the palace of Hades there was a garden where whispering poplars and weeping willows grew. They had no flowers and bore no fruit, and no birds sang in their branches. There was only one tree in the whole realm of Hades that bore fruit, that little pomegranate tree. The gardener of the underworld offered the tempting pomegranates to the queen, but Persephone refused to touch the food of the dead. Wordlessly she walked through the garden at silent Hades' side, and slowly her heart turned to ice. And there's a picture of Hades and Persephone in the underworld. Above, on earth, Demeter ran about searching for her lost daughter, and all of nature grieved with her. Flowers wilted, trees lost their leaves, and the fields grew barren and cold. Nothing could sprout and nothing could grow while the goddess of the harvest wept. People and animals starved, and the gods begged Demeter again to bless the earth, but she refused to let anything grow until she had found her daughter. Bent with grief, Demeter turned into a gray old woman. She returned to the meadow where Persephone had vanished, and asked the sun if he had seen what had happened, but he said no. Dark clouds had hidden his face that day. She wandered around the meadow, and after a while she met a youth. He told her that his brother, a swineherd, had seen his pigs disappear into the ground and had heard the frightened screams of a girl. Demeter now understood that Hades had kidnapped her daughter, and her grief turned to anger. She called to Zeus and said she would never again make the earth green if he did not command Hades to return Persephone. Zeus could not let the world perish, and he sent Hermes down to Hades, bidding him to let Persephone go. Even Hades had to obey the orders of Zeus, and sadly he said farewell to his queen. Joyfully, Persephone leaped to her feet, but as she was leaving with Hermes, a hooting laugh came from the garden. There stood the gardener of Hades, grinning. He pointed to a pomegranate from which a few of the kernels were missing. Persephone, lost in thought, had eaten the seeds, he said. Then dark Hades smiled. He watched Hermes lead Persephone up to the bright world above. He knew that she must return to him, for she had tasted the food of the dead. When Persephone again appeared on earth, Demeter sprang to her feet with a cry of joy and rushed to greet her daughter. No longer was she a sad old woman, but a radiant goddess. Again she blessed her fields, and the flowers bloomed anew, and the grain ripened. There's Persephone coming back up from the underworld to Demeter. Dear child, she said, never again shall we be parted. Together we shall make all nature bloom. But joy was soon changed to sadness, for Persephone had to admit that she had tasted the food of the dead and must return to Hades. However, Zeus decided that mother and daughter should not be parted forever. He ruled that Persephone had to return to Hades and spend 1 month in the underworld for each seed she had eaten. Every year, when Persephone left her, Demeter grieved. Nothing grew, and there was winter on earth. But as soon as her daughter's light footsteps were heard, the whole earth burst into bloom. Spring had come. As long as mother and daughter were together, the earth was warm and bore fruit. So, obviously, that was the story that the Greeks came up with to explain why the seasons changed. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Hera, and this is one of my favorite stories, is the one about Hera. Okay, so we have said that Hera is Zeus's sister and Zeus's wife. And if you're doing your book, mark out where it says goddess of and change that to queen of the gods. Zeus was like the god of gods, and she was the queen of the gods. Roman name is Juno, Juno. And her symbols are the peacock and the cuckoo bird. So peacock and cuckoo. Cuckoo. Okay. Hera, the beautiful queen of Olympus, was a very jealous wife. Even Zeus, who was afraid of nothing, feared her fits of temper. She hated all his other wives, and when Zeus first asked her to be his wife, she refused. Slyly, Zeus created a thunderstorm, changed himself into a little cuckoo, just a little bird, changed himself into a little cuckoo, and pretending to be in distress, he flew into Hera's arms for protection. She pitied the wet little bird and hugged it close to keep it warm. But all of a sudden she found herself holding mighty Zeus in her arms instead of the bird. Thus Zeus won Hera, and all nature burst into bloom for their wedding. Zeus loved Hera dearly, but he was also very fond of rocky Greece. He often sneaked down to earth in disguise to marry mortal girls. The more wives he had, the more children he would have, and all the better for Greece. All his children would inherit some of his greatness and become great heroes and rulers. But Hera, in her jealous rage, tormented his other wives and children, and even Zeus was powerless to stop her. She knew how tricky Zeus could be and kept very close watch over him. One day, as Hera looked down on earth, she spied a small dark thundercloud where no cloud should have been. She rushed down and darted into the cloud. Zeus was there just as she had suspected, but with him was only a little snow-white cow. He had seen Hera coming, and to protect his newest bride, Io, from her wrath, he had changed the girl into a cow. Alas, the cow was as lovely as the girl, and Hera was not deceived. But she pretended to suspect nothing and begged Zeus to let her have the little cow. Zeus could not well refuse his queen such a little wish without giving himself away, and he had to give her the cow. Hera tied poor Io to a tree and sent her servant Argus to keep watch over her. Argus was big and strong and had 100 bright eyes placed all over his body. He was Hera's faithful servant and the best of watchmen, for he never closed more than half of his eyes in his sleep at a time. So there's Hera, and there's Argus, and there's little Io that got turned into a cow. Argus sat down next to the cow and watched her with all his eyes, and poor Io had to walk on 4 legs and eat grass. She raised her mournful eyes to Olympus, but Zeus was so afraid of Hera that he did not dare to help her. At last he could no longer bear to see her distress, and he asked his son Hermes, the craftiest of the gods, to run down the earth and set Io free. Hermes disguised himself as a shepherd and walked up to Argus, playing a tune on his shepherd's pipe. Argus was bored, having nothing to do with all his eyes but watch a little cow, and he was glad to have music and company. Hermes sat down beside him, and after he had played for a while, he began to tell a long and dull story. It had no beginning and it had no end, and 50 of Argus's eyes closed in sleep. Hermes droned on, and slowly the 50 other eyes fell shut, one by one. Quickly Hermes touched all the eyes with his magic wand and closed them forever in eternal sleep. Argus had been bored to death. Hermes then untied the cow. Hera was furious when she saw that Argus was dead and the cow Io had been set free. She sent a vicious gadfly to sting and chase the cow. To be sure that her faithful servant Argus would never be forgotten, she took his 100 bright eyes and put them on the tail of a peacock, her favorite bird. The eyes could no longer see, but they looked gorgeous, and that went to the peacock's little head and made it the vainest of all the animals. And so then there's a picture of a peacock, and how they said that's how the peacock got his circles, was from Argus. Okay, so those are our stories today. We will fill in the blanks that you don't have on your slides on Monday. And your homework, we'll post it on Google Classroom, but it's to read Esther chapter 2. And then I'll give you those questions on Monday to do. Okay, well, email me if you need me, and I will see y'all on Monday.